video, we're going to be discussing how to use a yoga blanket. Now, this is part of a series of videos that I've created on why and how we use yoga props. And this is not an extensive list by any means. There are so many ways we can use them. But I'm just going to show some more common examples. So this is the yoga blanket I like to use. It's a Mexican blanket. You can also use a wool blanket. And really any blanket will do, but I do prefer a blanket that's a little denser so that it gives a little bit more support. If it's kind of too squishy, it might not give you the same amount of support. It could still be used, but it's not ideal. Predominantly, mostly, we use the blanket to support us, to give us support, whether it would be under the hips when we're seated, elevating the hips a little bit, or under the knees when we're lying on our back in order to provide some more comfort for the low back. Sometimes having the legs straight isn't comfortable and having the knees a little bent is a little more comfortable. Or under the knees when we're kneeling positions to provide some cushion and a little more cushioning for the knees. So I'm just going to show you why and how we sit on it. So if we're sitting on the floor and we tend to kind of round the low back and we feel like we're fighting gravity, and this can happen because maybe we're a little tight in the hips. So if that happens, elevating the hips can be helpful. So we can take the blanket underneath the pelvis, underneath the hips, and that can help us kind of tilt the pelvis forward and just find a little bit more of a nice comfortable seat. Now, if my knees are still up high and I'm still kind of rounding, you might even like to elevate a little more. You can even sit in a chair, but elevating the hips a little bit more might be needed if you feel like you're still fighting gravity, maybe stacking blankets, or you could take a yoga block and put a blanket over it to make it a little more cushiony, or even just sit on the block. But ideally, we want to be in a position where our knees are at least in line with the hips, ideally a little bit below them. And this just allows for the pelvis to maintain a bit of a neutral position without fighting gravity. Makes it a little more accessible. So another way that we can use the blanket is under the knees in Shavasana, in relaxation pose. So often at the end of class, we're going to do something called relaxation pose or Shavasana. And sometimes lying on the back with our knees completely straight is a little uncomfortable for some people in the low back. So if that is the case for you, you can simply take a blanket rolled up and placed under the knees. That might give some comfort. Another option would be actually to take a chair, which I'll show in the chair video. You could take a chair underneath the legs and elevate them that way. That works too. And the third way that we like to use them is under the knees when we're on the knees. So we have a little bit more support. So sometimes having the knees right on the ground, right on the mat is just a little uncomfortable. So we could take our blanket. You can even take a towel for this. You can even roll up the mat itself for extra padding. But here we're talking about the blanket. So I'm going to place the blanket under the knees. And that just makes this a little bit more comfortable. Completely out of frame, but you get the point, I think. I'm going to move this back. Okay, so having the blanket underneath the knees like this. And that works for hands and knees. It works for the lunge positions. And it even works for camel, a gentle back bend. I don't know if I'll stay in frame, but in a gentle back bend here like camel. It's helpful to have under the knees. So I hope that you found that helpful. And of course, you can take it and place it over you to keep you nice and warm when you're doing relaxation pose at the end of class. So this is some of the ways we can use a yoga blanket. And in the next video, I'm going to be talking about how we use the chair. I hope to see you there. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Namaste.